Hello, everyone, and welcome to another one of our series of Homestead from Scratch here with Logan Hyde and John Tejan. I'm Greg Dowd, and welcome to the show tonight. And tonight we're going to be talking about some cover crops, but I guess let's just shoot the breeze here for a second and just kind of talk about how everybody's doing. What's going
Well,
on? What's going on,
well,
John?
this week has been a huge change, not necessarily in the weather so much, but man, are the trees and everything starting to change over now. You're just seeing completely, all of even though we haven't really had a freeze, so to speak, the cool weather has really knocked back at least I'm talking about my pasture. It's knocked back some of the summer grass and some maybe summer weeds, whatever it might be. And the the honey locust, that I have out. Some of them are just volunteer out in the pasture, and they're sitting around, but they've all started turning this golden yellow, and it's just like this is literally my favorite time of the year. This is I will take October over any month of the year, almost in any place I've ever lived. It seems like October is like the best time of the year because it's the change of the seasons, but it's, you're coming from the warm into the cool, but it's not quite cold yet. The humidity lifts, life gets much more manageable when you've been battling, heat and humidity all summer long. And so I'm perfectly happy with the weather and how things are going.
Excellent, Logan. How was your week?
Oh yeah, pretty good, pretty good. We just working on projects. Worked on the cabin out there at your place yesterday. Everybody needs to go check that out on Greg's channel. The progress on that, we got a good bit further yesterday, and with Nate, the hog that we killed last weekend and processed. Snacked on it, and I had a pretty good week. Enjoying the fall weather too. It's also my favorite time of year, and just seeing the changes and everything. It's I'm looking forward to the days being shorter, but then at the same time not looking forward to it. I like to have long days to get a lot done, but it's going to be nice to get some much needed rest. Kind of same boat as you're in, Greg, needing to rest a little bit. I did a good bit today, so thank the Lord for that, because we all need it.
At least one day.
One day. No, pick one and rest.
Yeah, it definitely helps me. So we gather tonight. I think the topic of conversation we wanted to focus on was about cover crops. I really don't have very much knowledge in this area. I don't think we have ever attempted to do cover cropping for the winter time. So John, you have a little bit of experience, or we're going to put together a little bit of something for us.
And it's a work in progress. So it's because it's not an exact science. It's not even there is science involved in it, but depends on your location. It might take some time for you to figure out what actually works the best, but it's certainly something worth doing because there's really not a lot of expense. There's really not even a lot of work involved in it. So it's one of those low effort, high payoff type of things that you can do on your property, and a lot of times it's like, it's a lot of hard work and you just hope that it's going to turn out okay. This is kind of one of those easy things. So let me kind of just start out with cover cropping, what that is. And we'll kind of start off with some basics of soil health management. And one of the principles of soil health management is to keep living roots growing year round in your soil. Constantly keep something alive working in your soil, because number one, that's the way nature does it. Number two, it's the most beneficial thing. Because if you think of the way most people garden, and I'll use gardening as opposed to pasture management or any other type of use of cover crops, but let's just talk about gardens and the traditional way people garden is like, you know, and this is just kind of real basic. It's like, you know, in the spring, we get the tiller out and we till up the ground, might throw some compost on there, get some tomato plants in there, or beans or corn or whatever. And those are fairly long maturing, you know, those might take, you know, 60, 90, 120 days before they're done. So they kind of encompass the whole summer growing season, which is not the full growing season. But, you know, it's like, and then we're like, wow, we got all this corn, we got all this tomatoes. Let's can it, let's put it up, let's preserve it. Good thing. But then we'll pull up the plants or the corn or whatever it is, and we might throw that in a compost pile, and then we just leave the ground just to kind of go until next spring. We just kind of forget about it. It's like, well, you know, I can't grow anything, so we'll wait till next spring and we'll till it up again. We'll put some more compost and we'll grow some more tomatoes, and that's all good. There is nothing, well, there, although it's not bad, there's better ways to do it. You know, however you choose to garden is your decision. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but cover cropping is one of those things you can do to improve your process. You can still put compost on. Probably don't want to do as much tillage, you know, because one of the things with soil health management is that you really don't want to do a lot of tilling, because that destroys the structure of the soil. And by the structure of the soil, that keeps your soil together and clumping together, and it's humic acid and things that come from compost and microbial life. It keeps that soil in a solid, stable mass. Whereas, you know, if you overuse your soil, you know, it won't hold water, it won't hold nutrients. It's just not a very hospitable place for healthy vegetation to grow if you overuse it for a period of time. So what cover crops does, they basically keep something living in the soil. And when now there's cover crops, you know, farmers do this sometimes. It's called double cropping. It's like they'll do corn and then they'll do winter wheat or something like that. That is a cover crop. You know, and basically cover crop means you're keeping the soil covered with growing life as much of the year as possible. Obviously, in January and February, in most of the places in the Northern Hemisphere, even, you know, except maybe in the, you know, extreme South and tropical South, you know, things just kind of go on pause for a month or two. But you know, from say August, when you get your last tomatoes, or September, all the way up to probably December, there's a whole period of time that things can still be growing in the soil. And so that's what cover cropping is. It keeps the soil covered. And, you know, and there's some reasons for that. You know, as living roots in the soil are constantly feeding and interacting with microbial life, which obviously is the keystone of soil health management, is a healthy microbiome in the soil, so to speak, just like it is in your body. You know, and so it constantly keeps feeding from, you know, as the plants mature and as they grow, you know, the roots give off what are called exudates that feed the microorganisms in the soil, and they continue to break down organic matter, which actually makes nutrients available to the plants. And it's this whole cycle. So with cover cropping, there's a number of reasons why you do it. One of the keep things growing in the soil, keep the micro organisms and microbes growing. But another thing is when you and people may have experienced this. I'm sure most people have. Is like maybe they'll till up their garden, and this is nice tilled soil, and maybe it's not time quite to plant, and there's a nice rain, and you go out there, and there's this crust that forms on top of the ground, because the rain is the rain has hit it and turned that ground up a little bit. It's not tilling it, so to speak, but it's just causing certain impacts on there, and there'll be a crust that forms on the top of there. And that's not a good thing. It's not a hospitable place to grow things. It's not the worst thing in the world, but with that rain on bare ground, there's erosion that takes place. There's also not only erosion, but you're also pushing some of the nutrients out of the ground. I mean, as it impacts, and it's not super healthy. There's a better way to do it. And with cover crops, when you keep that ground covered with living vegetation, it kind of forms a bit of a canopy. So, as those raindrops are coming down from how many other 1,000 feet, that they travel through the atmosphere to hit the ground, or maybe only 100 feet, who knows however low the clouds are, that impact of the soil is breaking up that aggregation that you want that holds the soil together. It kind of breaks that up, and as the water runs off, it loosens that soil and then cause erosion, and you don't want erosion. And I think I may have I'm confusing my podcast, but I don't want to repeat myself. But the largest export we have, agricultural export in the United States, isn't a crop. It's actually soil washing into the Gulf of Mexico, and that's basically from people not doing good soil health management. And one of the ways that really would slow that down is cover crops, because if you plow up your corn in October and it sits bare in the Midwest, in Iowa, best topsoil in the world, but the rain, or the rain and the snow and winter comes along, and with frost and everything, it loosens the soil up, and all that with the spring rains, all that washes that down into the local creek, the local river, and it eventually makes it in the Gulf of Mexico. It's not a good thing. You work hard to build up organic matter in your soil. That is one of the key measures of how healthy your soil is, how much organic material or organic matter is in there. And to let that just be washed down and washed off your property is just, that's like crazy. That's like you're just like working so hard to build it up, and then instead of planting a cover crop, you just let it wash out, and that's not a good thing. There's better ways to do it, and I always stress, do what you want to do, but sometimes there's better ways to do that. And cover cropping is one that's not used very often. And let's get back to that garden example. People don't normally plant anything in this time of year. I mean, it's like the garden's done. We're done. Okay. Clean it up, make it look nice, and then next March or April, we'll go back out there and we'll get the garden ready. I mean, that's what most people do. Simply by and you don't even have to be really precise about this. A lot of people, you plant, if you direct seed and you got this nice long, row, and you're putting seeds in there, and you want to have it spaced out, and it's a bit of work. It's what gardening's all about. But I mean, literally, once the season's over and everything is out of the ground, you can literally buy a bag of seed of a cover crop and just hand sow it. That's what I do. I just sling it around. The more, the better. If you can buy it on sale, which you usually can in the fall, because they're, all the stores, people buy garden stuff, in the spring and by the summer, and it's hot and the plants are dying. It's like, they need room for pumpkins and Christmas trees, so they're selling their seed cheap. So it's a great time, and this is one chance. Is like you literally can't hardly put too much seed down. You just want it to be in there. It's a challenge. I got fortunate when I did my cover crop this year. Unfortunately, the hurricanes were not a fortunate thing for a lot of people in North Carolina and Tennessee, but it did for us in Middle Tennessee, gave us some moisture that we badly needed right at the end of September. I think it happened. And fortunately, when that happened, that's when I decided to put out my cover crop. Well, as you all know, it hasn't rained since then. It's been 30 days since we got any measurable moisture, but because it was put in, it was sown thick, and I use cereal rye. That's what I'm using this year. It's grown and it's taken off, and even though that we haven't had any rain, it's established itself, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results next spring. So, protecting the soil from rain, adding organic matter, because at the end of the season, which is at the end of the winter, when you're getting ready to start your next gardening season, you have to do, for cover crops, you have to terminate what's called terminating that crop. Now, there's a number of different ways you can terminate it. If you're planting something that is not super winter hardy, the cold weather will terminate it for you. Basically, terminating means basically killing it, right? Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger. There's another way of doing it is to, which is I'm going to do, is you actually crimp over the vegetation and basically break the stems on it and lay it down, and basically it kills the plant, and then the roots are still in there. If you use something like a cereal rye, like myself, it has a lot of it creates a lot of biomass, right? The more biomass you can lay down in your soil, the more organic matter you're going to accumulate in the soil. So the termination process is basically, in the springtime when you want to plant your cabbages and your tomatoes and your peppers and your corn or whatever, you've got to do something with the existing vegetation that you planted there, so you terminate it. And there's the third way, which I don't suggest, and I hope nobody ever does, but it's what farmers will do. It's chemical termination, right? They'll just literally just kill it with chemicals, and then the organic matter is there. Don't suggest that. That's not our way of doing things. Number one, it's probably not the most healthy thing, but number two, there's an expense to it. You got to buy the chemicals, right? So you're really and in a basic home garden area where maybe most people's garden's probably not going to be more than a quarter of an acre. That's a big garden, a quarter of an acre. Most people, it's a couple tomato plants and whatnot, right? And maybe a couple hundred square feet. So chemicals don't make even any sense there when you can just bend it over and step on it and smash it into the ground. And you can actually till it into the ground if you want to, but I'm not a big till guy. But you can definitely till it up. So let's kind of look at, so when you're saying cover crop, John, what are you actually talking about? Well, cereal rye is one of them. It's rye. There's ryegrass and then there's cereal rye, right? Ryegrass is what you put on your yard. Cereal rye is what the actual seed that's harvested for rye, which they make really delicious whiskey out of, by the way. But your cereal rye, you can have clover, radishes. There's all sorts of things, there's buckwheat, which is a fantastic thing to plant, especially for pollinators, because it's growing and flowering. I think probably one of the first things. There you go. All the good cover crop stuff in there. Crimson clover, fantastic. One of the things that I'm going to try, I've not done this year, Winter rye is actually what I'm using. Yeah, there you go. Erosion control and organic matter. But one of the ones I want to use, because my soil is fairly heavy clay. It's gravelly, it's rocky, it's really hard to dig in, and it's really hard to get organic matter down into the root zone, is using radishes. And I think I saw radishes in there. Radishes are awesome because and it's not necessarily to eat, but as you think of a radish, they've got a little, a little round nodule, or some of them are longer, depending on white radishes. Icicle radishes might be 6 inches long. But what happens is they'll grow this time of year all the way through probably December, and then when it get you a real hard freeze, they'll die. But you have this hole in the ground full of organic matter that's been drilling down, that will decompose. They'll feed the microbiome, so to speak, in the soil, and it'll loosen up the soil a little bit. A lot of people do this to loosen the soil a little bit, and especially people that do. And I'm kind of going a little bit more into the ag side, but people do a lot of tilling with the rototiller. You're still going to create what's called a hard pan, which is, as those tines go down, they only go so deep, and they're great for the first 6 or 12 inches of the ground, but doing that over and over again creates a very hard compacted soil right under that level, that depending on what type of plant or even tree that you want to grow, it'll do great those first 12 inches, and they'll hit the hard pan, and it's like concrete to the plant, and they can't go any deeper. And as we know, as plants if they need to go deeper to find water nutrients, we have to make that available to them. So that's another reason. But yeah, there's all kind of plants, but really when it comes down to it, whatever works. And some of these actually can be, cover crops can actually be a second crop. It depends on what you want. It doesn't have to be harvest. I mean, there's one section I got radishes and spinach and lettuce in there, because that's going to grow for the next couple, 2-3 months where we live. It's not going to freeze out. So, I mean, I took the tomatoes out a couple weeks ago and threw, basically, everybody's got this at home. If you've been gardening for any period of time, you got that manila envelope or that bag or whatever it is, and you've got probably 200 different types of seeds in there that you haven't planted for like the past 10 years. It's that collection of seeds that you have. Everybody has that thing, and it's like, I don't know if these are good anymore. It's like, well, this didn't turn out really well. This is a great time to empty those out, if they'll grow in colder weather. Now, if it's a real, if it's a warm weather thing, but like, cabbage, broccoli, all the brassicas, lettuces, spinach, kale, mustard greens, all that stuff, Well, I heard mustard greens were really good, and we bought a bunch a while ago, and after one season, nobody wanted to eat them, but we got all these mustard green seeds, just sling them out there. It doesn't have to be scientific. It doesn't have to be perfect. And that's the whole thing. And I'm kind of starting adopting that in my gardening and even in my pasture management. It's like, I think we get a little bit too technical and too exact in the way we want to do things. And if the spacing is 6 inches, and if it's 7, that's not good. So I need to it needs to be, no, just put it in, man. Just get it in there, because people overthink and over-engineer things that don't need to be over-engineered. Because why do they do that? Well, it looks good. Well, that's a nice straight row, and the spacing's perfect, and that's a really pretty garden. We don't care about that. I mean, I don't care about it. Some people might care about that. If you're living,
if you're growing for like a profit or whatever, then you want to, I guess, maximize your space and be the most efficient.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll refrain from that. Yeah, if that's your business and you're growing for profit, then some of these techniques you're going to use, some of you like, it just doesn't make sense, whatever, I'm going to till, I'm going to do whatever, because it makes me the most money. And that's fine. I mean, like I said, I don't, however you decide to garden, that's fine with me. But these are just some ideas to think about. But yeah, just, and with cover crops, literally you can just sling it out there and you can even, I've done this too. As a matter of fact, I can't wait till it rains so I can put some more seeds out, because I did just kind of sling it out there, and there's some thin spots that I want to come back and go over it again. And it's still early enough in the season, radish seeds, spinach seeds, that stuff. As long as the ground isn't frozen, they'll almost always germinate and sprout and start growing. I mean, they don't need, the soil temperature needs to be 70 degrees or they won't germinate. It's like these are tough. These cover crops are tough just for that reason. It's not meant to be a delicate science to get those things in there and growing in the soil. And just get it out there and that's why I say, you don't have to be precise or whatever. It's like, because if you're thinking about that and if you're concentrating on that, that's probably means you're hesitating and you're not taking action and you're not doing what's best for the soil. And it's and it's going to be an experiment to some level. Gardening is a never-ending experiment. We never have gotten it completely figured out, because about the time you think your soil's perfect for this tomato, well, that tomato is just not as productive as it used to be, and you need to change varieties, and you need to change practices. So don't be afraid that you're doing it wrong, because there's really no way of doing it wrong. The only wrong way is not doing it at all, right? I'm kind of from that school. It's like, because I used to be the other way. I would overthink it and over-engineer it, and I'm like measuring the beds and putting out this, and then it's like it just got to be too much, and I'm like, this on this, I'm not going to do this too hard. It's making my brain hurt. I have to do math and shit, and it's like, no, we're not going to do this. So yeah, just go out there and you'll find the way that's going to work. But when it comes to cover cropping, I just think it's something that everybody needs to at least try once. I mean, if it's not for you, it's not for you, and that's okay. It's not a lot of work. The only work is in terminating it in the springtime. Sowing seed by hand is really easy, but terminating it in the spring, and that's where you really have to be focused on, like with cereal rye, super important, because it actually is a pretty detailed science about when you actually can terminate it, because if you terminate it too early, and by crimping you're basically stepping on it and breaking that stem and chopping it up a little bit, not completely, but you're impacting it to where it breaks its stem. If it's too early, it'll just keep growing. It'll sprout out from around that, right? Just like a tree would when it's been trimmed back, and it'll sprout from the ground sometimes. And if you wait too late, the seeds have already started to form, so you're basically reseeding your garden at the wrong time of year. You're gonna have continual grass growing in your garden all year round if you wait too late. So you have to catch it at that perfect point where you're terminating it where the seed is not viable, but you're terminating it late enough, when you bend it over and break it, that it won't grow back, right? And actually, and this is getting probably more technical than most people want to know, is on cereal rye, it'll start forming a seed head and the individual grains, and you basically pull those grains off and you squeeze them. If you squeeze them and milk, and it's called the milk stage, and if you squeeze them and like milk comes out, that's when you terminate it. If you squeeze it and it's hard and it's already set, that seed's going to sprout again when it hits the ground. So you kind of screwed up at that point, So So there's certain things you need to know when to terminate. But and I was using probably the most technical one. Radishes, they're going to die off. You don't really need to do anything. Some of these winter dying. Then there's root vegetables, and there's also legumes that you want to add some nitrogen back to the soil. And you'll have to terminate those as well. But it's certainly something that I think is worthy. I like technical. Well, thank you, Nathaniel McNaughton. I appreciate that, because I kind of start geeking out on this stuff after a while, because it's like pretty cool.
Yeah, the thing with the cover crops when I started to learn about it is that I guess the whole root system being in the soil is interacting with the microbiology, and they're able to, I guess it can, like you were saying, those exudates or whatever that are being put down by the roots of the plants are feeding the microorganisms, and and thus it's, I guess, kind of keeping that whole life and biology alive in the soil, or helping it grow as well.
Right.
For your next crop.
Right. All winter long, it's still active. It's still moving. Not at the same pace when it's warmer. They do slow down, but there's still that natural interaction between the plant and the microbes that continues all winter long. So when spring comes around, it's not like they're waking up from, basically going dormant because there's no activity in the soil. It's kind of a little lower level, but it ramps up a little quicker, and you get a little quicker pop in the springtime, which, some people like, and it's necessary for certain crops to have things get off to a quick start in the springtime.
Well, the quicker you can get started, the better. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm again, one of the things that this is forcing me to do with the particular type of cover crop I'm doing, because I literally have to wait till it hits the milk stage on that grain. I can't terminate it before or after, so that determines when I'm actually going to be able to plant my actual crop for the next year, right? Yeah. But I've also done some reading, and it's just because the way we are as human beings, and also tip of the hat to market gardeners, you want to be the first guy at the farmer's market with those juicy tomatoes in like the first week in May, when other people are barely getting, their crops in the ground. I mean, that's having that, greenhouses and a big jump start is really important to people like that, because you're the first of the market. You can command the best price, and it's profitable and all that other good stuff. But for a homesteader, what I think is more important is what's going to thrive, at what point, because it's like, well, as long as you plant it after the first frost date, and that's if you want to get a jump on things. But there's no problem with putting tomatoes in the middle of June. You don't have to have them in the ground by the middle of May or the first week in May. Yeah, it's great, but it's like, maybe be a little bit more patient, because sometimes, and I don't know, it seems ever since I moved onto this farm, it's like we get these kind of late spring frosts or the little cold spell right at the end, and it just when your stuff's starting to go, it just kind of gets knocked back a little bit. It might not, kill it off, but it's like it knocks it back a little bit, and you're like, it's almost like you lost like 2 weeks, of the growing season, because it slowed everything down. But if you wait longer to put things in, then that's not a problem, right? Because one of the things is like, okay, last frost date, but I think probably one of the more important things is, what is the soil temperature when you're planting your crops? Because that's what, especially if you're using transplants, transplants already go into shock when you put them into normal soil, right? There's always going to be that it's a little different microbiome, different light patterns, different moisture, and different soil temperature. And they sometimes they struggle for quite a while before they take off, but they eventually take off. But I think a lot of that has to do with soil temperature, because those roots, if they've been sitting there at Home Depot in their little plastic container under cover and they're not getting cold, and all of a sudden you're out on your land, which has not been underneath the cover, and the temperature might be a little bit cooler, or it dips down at night, and that just causes some transplant shock. It's not the worst thing in the world, it's not the end of the day, but it kind of takes that off of your things to worry about list, if you plant a little bit later. I mean, because you're feeding yourself. I'm assuming you're not planning the first week in May, because you're going to starve to death if you don't have tomatoes by 4th of July or something, right? I mean, we're a little bit better managed than that. So waiting a little bit longer, maybe for potentially a better harvest, might not be. But that's kind of getting away from the subject of cover crops. But depending, and I'm kind of getting back, I'm kind of like doing the weave like Donald Trump did. I'm kind of getting off track here.
Going out wide, bringing it back in.
You got to bring me back in sometimes. So
yeah, take a real wide stance, and then we got to bring it back in.
Bring it back in, buddy.
Yeah.
Land that. We always used to say that, and when I worked in the corporate world, when somebody would get on do a presentation and start doing that, getting off track, it's like, land the plane, dude. Just land the plane. Get it on the ground, man. Just land the plane. Let's get there. Let's get there safe and sound before you run us out of gas. But anyway, getting back to cover crops and I was getting to methods of terminating and why it's important timing. You can plant whenever you want to. So yeah, that's all dependent, and you had a good chart up there. There's plenty of information out there. This information is not just come from my brain. There's plenty of information and for your location, your climate, time of year, what you're trying to accomplish with it. What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to improve organic matter? Are you trying to improve the biome? Are you trying to stop erosion? Those are all things that you have to, and that's sometimes, and I'm going to blame that on YouTube and social media, is like we see something and we go, I'm going to try that. That looks really interesting, and we don't know the context that was done in, and maybe we do, and maybe we're not familiar enough with our context. So that's a good plan. I go out and buy it, put it in the ground, and it should work, and it doesn't, but just find out what works for you in your area, like these cover crops. It's like, maybe cereal rye will work for me, whereas some type of clover will work for people further south in the deep south, there's not much of a worry about things freezing out during the winter time. And they basically, are growing practically double cropping all year long. So yeah, just take that, the county extension service should be able to kind of help you, but they're not into cover cropping, but they can at least point to certain things that maybe people would used in the local area. But it's not difficult. It's not hard. I think it's something everybody can do. And the thing is not that as many people do that, because it's not a new concept, but for home gardeners, it is. It is, because we're still gardening the same way, my grandfather taught me how to garden, when I was a little kid, and it's just till that ground up, throw your plants in there, throw some Miracle-Gro on there, and, get them tomatoes out there, and grandma's going to can them. And then we just let that ground go till next spring, maybe throw some manure on it. And it's not a bad way. It's not a wrong way. But I said, people are now with science and understanding are going, you know what? You can put this cover crop in the winter. You don't have to do anything. It's not like you have to cut the grass. You don't have to harvest anything. It just sits there all winter long until the springtime.
It's actually a lot less work, I think.
It is the least work. That's why I said, you just take all that seed that you just had in rat holing from the last 10 years and you never used, and just sling it out there. You're not going to use it anyway, or most likely you're not going to use it anyway.
Well, what if you got a situation like this guy here? I'm trying to build over everything in my soil. My soil test basically said the moon has better soil.
All right. Am I coming through? Am I coming through clear enough? Because I'm starting to get a buzz from your microphone, Doug, or I mean, Greg.
From my microphone? Yeah, you're coming.
Yeah.
Maybe it's my microphone acting up.
Can you say something, Logan? See if it's not the transmission. It might be.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just Greg's microphone.
Oh, so you're hearing it? You're hearing it too? Okay. Good.
Yep.
Okay. Well, Nathaniel says I'm trying to build over everything in my soil, and basically the soil test says it's it's basically better on the moon to grow stuff there. So that's pretty good. Well, one of the, and I'll say this, and this may sound like a normal prescription, but certainly, adding compost to your soil and organic matter is going to be your number one goal, because that's going to fix a lot of stuff. I mean, depending on the soil test, whether it's sandy or clay, if it's one extreme or another on that continuum, it's like super sandy or super clay, you might have to do some other amendments to your soil. But get the compost in there, get something growing in the soil, keep it covered year round. That's basically what I would do. I mean, compost, manure. I mean, get whatever organic matter you can onto your ground. Now, if it's so bad that doesn't even phase it, you might have to haul in dirt and build up a bed of decent soil if that's necessary. But don't know the context of that you're at, but I sometimes I feel like that on where I am, because I literally, there's a couple places on my farm where I could jump on a spade and it will go 6 inches into the ground. It's going to hit a rock. It's going to hit something. It's not going to go in. And so that my soil is shale rocks and an old pine field. Okay, well, there you go. That's not all that much different than I think some of us. But I would prioritize my gardening method on building organic matter, because that's really the only way that the soil's even going to support anything, at least from what I'm seeing. I mean, I didn't see the soil test, and that probably wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to me because it's a lot of numbers. Anyway, yeah. This is what I would do. I put compost down, but I would go with the Ruth Stout method of gardening. I would just get bales of hay and literally just cover the surface of the ground after you've planted, and just put about 4 inches of hay. You can use straw. There's reasons why you'd use one over the other. I would use hay. There's much more nutrients in hay than there are straw. Yeah, there's some seed in the hay, but that's a minor problem that you have right now. Is I don't think anything's growing in your soil the way you describe it. So yeah, I would prioritize as much organic matter into the ground, and that's going to come with. And if you don't know the Ruth Stout method of gardening, it's basically, she just believed in using hay as mulch, probably 4 to 6 inches on her ground. She's kind of comes from the lazy gardener school of gardening. It's like, and she's in, I think, Vermont or Massachusetts, up in the Northeast. I'm trying to do the same thing here to some extent, and I live in Tennessee. I don't know, Nathaniel, where you live, but I mean, Bermuda grass is a pox upon my house, because it ruins all the joys in life. It gets in your garden, it gets in your flower beds, and nothing short of chemicals can kill it. And even that doesn't do a really good job. So So again, landing the plane here, depending on your context, I would definitely use the root stout method and build up as much organic matter as quickly as possible, because at least from what you're saying is there's probably not any in yours, or very little, if it's basically moon dust from what you said. So I don't know, anybody else has any input on that?
I've got a property that has it was harvested for timber. Now, it wasn't a pine field, but something to remember about these places where you've either had crops harvested, whether it's annual crops or whether you're talking about trees, is that even though, like in a tree's instance, the majority of the tree is built up from carbon from the air. And so, there's not a whole lot that trees build their bodies from that comes directly out of the soil. If that were the case, and there'd be big old sinkholes everywhere where trees were growing, they're, filtering a lot of stuff out of they're getting that carbon out of the air, the carbon dioxide to build their bodies with. Now, that they are taking some minerals with them and some nutrients from the soil. So you've got an area that they've been taking that, from repeatedly growing those pines. Yeah, you're going to be missing a lot of stuff. And it's theorized that pine actually stores a ton of calcium in their trunks and in their needles and everything. They're, just taking up tons of it. And that's what a lot of times causes the acidic soils, rather than, putting down pine straw is what's causing the acidic soils. It's that they've taken the hardness out of the ground, pretty much. My philosophy has become, as far as with building soil, is that if one is the crappiest, moon soil, and a 10 is, fantasy or, Garden of Eden type soil that, you could throw Skittles down and they grow into a Skittles bush, I had rather put effort into 20 square feet and get it to a level 5 than try to get, a quarter acre to a level 1 or level 2 from a level 1. Because when you focus on one area and get it to where it needs to be, one, it's going to start to take care of itself for the most part, and you're going to get that almost like a compounding interest. And it's also going to affect the soil around it. And so I find it, for me, we've been doing that method here. And I've even, like, with the way I plant annual plants now is completely different from any other method that I've seen people do, except for Masanobu Fukuoka from One Straw Revolution. He did the clay balls just to strow seed. For us, though, we're doing just like, I'm taking a plop of the good stuff. So it'll be a mix of biochar. It'll have some manures in it, and maybe a little bit of compost, or something like that. It's just almost like taking a poop like an animal would do, because a lot of these annual plants go through the digestive system of animals, or a fruit seed or whatever it may be, and they come out and they've got just a little fertilizer packet that goes with them. And we've been planting like that and had a lot of success with it. And so trying to build those little pockets really helps, because nature can distribute a lot of stuff. So it's not necessary to try to just get it all at once. And two, you're going to have far better results. You're going to get far better returns on something that is, hyper focused at a reasonable size that you can manage. Because I know, John, you mentioned at the first, the biggest being like a quarter acre. A quarter acre garden will wear you out.
Yeah.
You're going to be, you're going to be so tired by the time you get done. Especially if you're tilling, my goodness. I mean, I used to, like, as a teenager, I used to till and plant corn and watermelons and stuff, it's work. I mean, it is a lot of work and all the weeding and everything. So for us, we've got to where we're doing that. And cover crops this year, I've planted some stuff that counts as cover crops, but I mainly just strode them out into pasture because we're not big on the gardening. And I like what Nathaniel said about the deer eating the radishes and everything. That's what we're about. We're about planting a lot of that stuff for the animals. And so what I've got right now is I've got red clover and I've got hairy vetch growing in the garden patch. And so all the zucchinis have pretty much died off, and the milo that was planted by the chickens is starting to die off, and we're getting, all those little plants coming up. So that's going to be food for the rabbits, probably give some of it to the sheep too. But I think that cover crops is something we're going to do. But I mean, it does have a very specific use. It's for your annual garden, even though you may not be growing annuals, all annuals. I mean, a lot of people don't know tomatoes not an annual, a pepper's not an annual. Those are both perennials. They just won't survive our winters. So, yeah, I mean, I think that really hyper focusing on those certain areas will be what will turn a property around, because really, especially if you're just one person, getting anything bigger than a quarter acre is a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of time. But if you can go and hyper focus on that one area and do just add a little bit more every year, it won't be long, and you get those compounding effects to where it's basically doing it on its own after a while.
Yeah, Logan, you really mentioned when you talked about kind of the seed bomb approach, and that's real interesting as I think about it. As you don't compost the whole area, you only provide compost for the plants and seeds that are growing, that you want to grow, I should say. There's stuff growing everywhere probably, but you're right. That sets up just those little ecosystems all across the area where you throw those. You don't have to cover the whole thing, but one every 10 square feet or what however you want to calculate it. And you don't even have to be exact. Just spread them around. Let a new more diversity flourish in that area and get a good head start. Let it go to seed. Maybe I don't know exactly what seeds you're putting in there, but if you want them to flourish in that area, let them go to seed, and hopefully they replant themselves next year, and that ecosystem will naturally spread as the microbes and the microbiome underneath the soil starts to expand. And yeah, it's a great idea. I'd never thought of that.
And we've done some for the zucchinis. This time I took just 3 shovelfuls of bedding. It was basically like mulch from the chicken coop and rabbit manure, some biochar, and just a mixture of stuff. Had it all in the wheelbarrow. And when you make a little pile about yay big, you really ain't got to do no weeding around that because it's smothered out. If you do a high, tall enough little pile, you're smothering out everything that's right around it. You're giving that seed a head start. And you can look at my garden on YouTube. You can look at it from starting in the spring till now. It's never been perfect. It's always had weeds in amongst it. It's always had grass. But, the thing is we still got the produce from it. So I'm kind of like, I don't care. It's got some millions as a border with just some stump, or pieces of like firewood for posts just set up in the corners, and those millions screwed together. And we just came in there. The chickens were in there for a little bit to terminate some stuff and add fertilizer. And I did a compost pile in it and spread it out. But then, when we wanted to replant, I just went in there with about 3 shovelfuls for each plant and, planted in that little hill, and whatever grew, whatever we could get. We got tons of tomatoes. Something I will mention, I know John touched on tomatoes a good bit and about, getting them in late. Here's a little secret. You don't have to have all of your tomatoes red for you to have a successful season. all of our cherry tomatoes were red when we harvested, and all the plants were starting to die. But I think we had a little bit of a blight come through. We got all the red cherry tomatoes, and then everything else, all the green pretty tomatoes that nothing had touched. There were no bugs in them. All we did was we picked every single one of them. It was a butt ton, and we put it inside on the counter. And guess what? They all ripened. And so, I mean, it's not necessarily the most natural thing. Yeah, maybe there's some stuff to having a sun ripened tomato and everything, but wife still liked them. She used all of them. And
let me add some experience. It was a little off, so not too much, but since you're talking about picking things early, this is my first productive year of persimmons. And when they go from a dark green, not a dark green, just kind of a green, and then they just turn into this just bright orange. You're right, just like a tomato turns red, just like an apple turns red. And I finally figured out, I'm a slow learner. That's what the birds are waiting for when they get that visual signal. It's ripe, and if you don't pick it at, it's hard to get something vine ripe at the peak of ripeness, because most likely animals are going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately for me, I mean, this year I was like, I just need to pick these early. And like you said, it might not be natural, but natural 0, unnatural, butt ton of tomatoes. So yeah, pick your poison.
Yeah.
I'll go with the good harvest.
Well, and what I was going to say, just a PSA for everyone. I love persimmons, but I'm going to tell you right now, if you pick them when they're like that bright orange before they really get to where they're mush, get ready for them lips to pucker, because boy, are they astringent. You'll taste cotton in your mouth for like an hour after that. And but boy, if you get them at just the right point to where there's a certain variety that we have that grew up here on the neighbor's property, and he'd let us go up there and pick them. And boy, let me tell you, if you can get them at just the right time, the top of it almost just pops off like a top. And I really don't like the skins, but it's got a ton of fruit in the middle of it. And we take them things and just go and suck everything out of the middle like candy, man. I mean, it's delicious.
It's literally, I think, the highest sugar content fruit there is.
It is sweet.
It's just like taking a thing of honey and just going in your mouth. It's like, it's really sweet.
I might make honey people mad, but to me, I mean, honey, yes, it's sweet and everything, but I'm not as crazy about honey as I am about like a persimmon or another fruit like it. It's way better to me.
Yeah, and it's this year I did it on a whim, and I planted 25 trees.
Heck yeah.
4 years ago, and I'm like, and I didn't know that much about persimmons, but I'm going, this is going to be my test plot. I'm going to try a couple different varieties. I'm going to learn how to graft. I'm going to learn how to raise them. The ones I like, I'll reproduce. The ones I won't, cut them down and graft something else on. And so now these trees are just now starting to produce, and it's like, I'm going to have way more than I'll ever. Mm-hmm. I got to find out what I'm going to be able to do with it, and
you won't regret it. I can tell you that.
Yeah. So it's all good. A little persimmon, PSA there.
Talk to me into doing a cover crop. Is my microphone still straight up?
Still kind of fuzzy.
Sounds a little fuzzy.
I think it's time for me to get a new microphone. Yeah.
Yes, I would assume yes. So.
There goes John's. Yours was a little crackly. I don't know if mine's crackly.
No, you've been coming through clear up till now.
Yeah. Y'all both said Trump, so maybe the government's trying to shut you down. I hadn't said it yet. We'll see if my microphone gets a little crackly.
I did vote the other day, though.
I hate to hijack the plane, but I will tell y'all this. So, like, I don't even invest much in the politics because I feel like planting 25 persimmon trees does a lot more for your freedom than anything to do with all the, political circus we got going on. But now we'll tell you this. I started watching the Joe Rogan podcast with Trump. And so I've got through half of it. And I laughed so hard because Trump goes on this spiel about the Air Force One pilots. He's like, Joe, these guys, they're so good looking. He keeps talking about how good looking they are. And he said, if I got all these guys together and made a movie, he said, nobody would believe it because, they're just so good looking. And, I'm just saying, he almost went to the point where, like, they had the most kissable lips. They were like cool blokes. He went on and on. And I thought, how is it that, the internet's just not flooded with memes about the Air Force One pilots? Because, he did. He kept on.
I'm sure they'll be out there.
Yeah. And when you were talking about the plane, I started cracking up because it was like, here they go talking about Trump. I was sure one of y'all were going to mention it, but I thought I don't want to derail us too much on the cover crops, but it was a funny, very memeable moment.
Awesome. Looks like we about hit the hour.
Yeah, we hit the hour. John, really good presentation there. Thanks for putting all that together. And guys, go once around the horn and let people know where people can find you and support you.
Yeah, I'm still on X at Soul Survivor 78. If you want to find me there and find out about what I think about more things than just gardening, unfortunately, but
Yeah.
Hold on to your hat.
Yeah, I'm on X now too. I haven't posted anything. I made an account for Hideaway Homestead just that way too I could follow John. I do have another X account, but it's so old and has nothing on. I was like, well, I might as well just do one for Hideaway Homestead. So there's that. You can probably find me if you look up my name on X. I'm on YouTube. And you can email me if you want to at hideawayhomestead@gmail.com. And who knows, maybe I do make memes from time to time. Maybe I need to just get some of the handsome pilot memes and post them on there so y'all can go check out mine, John's X, and see if we can get some Trump memes on there.
All right, and I'm Greg, and you can find me. I'm on X, YouTube, the Tinker Trap here. If you like this content, then subscribe and share it with somebody. Try to bring you folks some good content, some good interviews and stuff, and some things that I'm doing. So, and with that, we'll close it out for another week, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks again, guys.